Good morning, Rocky Mount. I'm Crystal Dawes. If there is one person synonymous with the words tennis champion, it is Billie Jean King. She won her first Wimbledon title in 1961, and from there went on to win 20 more, often being referred to as a legend at Wimbledon. As if that's not enough, she has spent her entire career fighting for women athletes to receive equal treatment and pay in a male-dominated field. Today, she continues on using her own life experience to educate the public, this time discussing her battle with hypertension. In addition, joining us is Dr. Marvin Moser, a leading cardiologist. Good morning to the both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Crystal.
Great. It's great to be here. I wanted to ask you, or actually I wanted to say rather, when you think of healthy people, you often think of athletes. Were you surprised when you were diagnosed with this hypertension?
Well, Crystal, I'm 63 now. It was about 8 years ago that I was diagnosed with hypertension, and I take Altace and diuretics each day to help keep it under control. But it hasn't really changed my lifestyle, and I think it's really important for people to think about prevention and make sure you take care of your blood pressure, make sure that it's below 140 over 90. And ideally, of course, you want it about 120 over 80 in an ideal world, but to keep track of it, because I take it every so often and I keep track and make sure that I'm on point with it. And so, because it really does, if you can manage your high blood pressure, it really helps reduce risk of other heart disease and kidney disease and other diseases. And it's also important to keep my weight down, because obesity is a factor as well. And just to take good care of myself and be an advocate for myself, like all of us need to be.
Absolutely. Dr. Moser, I understand you conducted a survey with adults who have been diagnosed with high blood pressure. Could you tell us about the results and what it means for people suffering from it?
Yeah, well, this is a national survey, and several things came out. One is, and it was no surprise, that more than 60% of the people who have high blood pressure are very obese. We don't mean 5 or 10 or 15 pounds overweight. We mean 20, 30, 40 pounds heavier than they should be. Obesity does correlate pretty well with hypertension, but the question you asked Billie Jean was also interesting, because people who are athletic, who feel well, who are active and vigorous, can also develop high blood pressure. The survey also showed that the awareness of risk is increasing dramatically in this country. 20, 30, 40 years ago, lots of people never associated high blood pressure with strokes and heart attacks and heart failure, and now over 90% of people associate it. The other thing it showed is that many people, over 90% now, are taking some medication to control their blood pressure, and although we talk about lifestyle changes, losing weight, cutting your salt down, exercising, etc., most of the time, for the majority of hypertensive patients, they have to take medication to get their pressure down. We're happy to see that, because we know it can prevent strokes and heart attacks and heart failure.
At what age should you start closely monitoring your blood pressure?
Well, I think everyone should have their pressure checked every couple of years until they're about 40. If it's normal, you can go every 2 or 3 or 4 years. After the age of 40, it's probably a good idea to check it every year. And if it trends upward, then you should begin paying attention to it. And if it gets, as mentioned before, if it gets above 140 over 90, which are the two readings doctors record, then something should be done about it. When you get over 50 or 60 or 70, more than 60% of the people in this country will have elevated blood pressure.
That's a staggering amount of people. I heard you mention some preventative steps you can take before being diagnosed. I want to spend some more time on that. I think that's very important.
Well, what you should do is prevent yourself from getting obese if you can do that. An obese adolescent is an obese adult. And I think it's incumbent upon parents to make certain that their kids get enough exercise, which is very difficult in our world, because everything is now team sports and lots of less free play, and everybody's eating foods that are very high in calories. Very important to prevent people from getting obese. And the other thing is, in certain populations, the black population, for example, who are salt sensitive. In other words, if they eat too much salt, it will predispose them to high blood pressure. In those populations especially, but in all of us, you should limit the amount of salt you eat. And salt is an acquired taste so that if you train your kids not to put salt on everything, they probably will grow up to be adults who don't eat a lot of salt. Those are two preventive measures that are very important. Exercise, keeping your weight down, and lowering your salt intake.
Those are great tips. I especially enjoyed the one about the children, because oftentimes you do see kids just using salt, eating terrible foods, and I think that you're right, it starts at an early age. So,
well, some of that is socioeconomic, though, because it's very difficult, for example, to take a family of 4 out to a restaurant and not spend a great deal of money unless you go to a Burger King or a McDonald's or a Wendy's or a Kentucky Fried Chicken place. So it's incumbent upon us to get those in those places, to reduce the amount of salt in their food, to reduce the amount of saturated fat.
in your survey, since you mentioned that, I wonder, in your survey, did you find that high blood pressure was higher, the numbers were higher within different classes and economic groups?
Well, we didn't in this survey find that, but in most surveys in the United States, for example, and indeed throughout the world, hypertension is more common in blacks, and it's more common in obese, and of course it's more common in the elderly. In this survey, we didn't look that specifically. We did find one interesting thing, though. People in the higher socioeconomic groups, people with incomes of over $75,000, thought that losing weight would cure hypertension, and that was a higher number than in the lower socioeconomic groups, which is sort of interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
So are you saying that you cannot cure high blood pressure, you can only manage it?
Well, you can't cure it unless you have a specific form of it, and that occurs about 5% of all people with high blood pressure. So of the 65 million people in this country, you're talking about a certain number where you can find a cause and cure it. But you can't cure the usual kind of high blood pressure. The important message is, though, that you can control it and you can prevent all of the, or most of the, complications that used to occur, the strokes and heart failure and heart attack and kidney failure, which can be prevented by lowering blood pressure.
I have a question for Billie Jean King. What was your motivation to let the public into your personal health life, and what do you want to come from this?
Well, I just want to encourage people to take care of themselves and have their blood pressure taken, to really think about preventative medicine. I've always been in that in my life anyway. As I said, when we started the Women's Sports Foundation back in the 70s, health is everything. Also to get our young people to think about it and to be active and to know about all these things, that how to take care of yourself, like the salt. Like if you're young, your taste buds, if they get used to a lot, they're going to demand a lot as you grow up. But if my parents, we ate very bland food actually, and I still like bland food, so I don't really like the salt factor very much. So I'm lucky in that case. But I have a lot of friends who just love salt. In fact, I have one friend, he just starts salting everything right off the bat. He doesn't even taste it, and it's just a habit. And he actually does have hypertension, so I'm sure that was one of the factors, because he just throws a ton of salt on everything.
A quick point, you asked Billie Jean what motivated her to let us into her private life. We tried for years at the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute to get active athletes, famous athletes,
Really?
to come on as spokespersons. And we found a great deal of resistance among basketball players, football players, who didn't want to admit they had high blood pressure because they felt it might influence their contracts or careers. And we now know that people can do anything they want to do, whether it's basketball, football, tennis, or whatever. They can control their pressure and they can participate in sports. But we had a great deal of trouble finding spokespeople, so that it's very nice that you're doing it.
I don't have any secrets, and I think it's important to
Your
pay
career
attention.
isn't
I just
over,
wish
though.
you'd asked me when I was playing. Of course, I had very good blood pressure then, but
right.
I would have talked about it anyway. But
Sure.
Sure. I just think it's great when people start to take over their lives and take care of themselves and be advocates for themselves and their families.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Billie Jean King and Dr. Moser. It's been a pleasure being with you this morning.
Thanks,
you.
Crystal.
Have a great day.
Hi, Raleigh.
Bye.
And thank you, Rocky Mount. We'll see you next time for news, views, and interviews on WNCR TV. I'm Crystal Dawes. Have a great day.